Hello and welcome to Hashtag No Limits. I am your host, Shelley Keno. Hashtag No Limits is about people whose society places limits upon, but who are busting through those limits. Ophelia says from Hamlet, I know who we are, but not who we will be. And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is not a better or more beautiful example than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. For those who don't know, I'm going to give you a super simple, quick science lesson of how that happens. Basically, the caterpillar literally dissolves into cells, and just when it must think its life is over, it reforms into the butterfly in the chrysalis, but it's not finished yet. Once it's in that cocoon, it still has to struggle and fight for its wings to be strong enough to take it everywhere it's going to soar. That can't be easy, but neither is busting through limits that society places upon us. And I love to do hashtag no limits because I get to meet some amazing people and I get to bring their stories to you. Before we bring on my guest today, I just want to remind you if you are watching to please like, subscribe, hit that notification button so that you don't miss one single second or episode of hashtag no limits. And I also do some other items where I offer some free advice on special education because I am a special education consultant. And then make sure if you're watching in the replay today that you give us a hashtag replay and where you're watching from. If you have any comments or questions for my guest or myself regarding our episode, please leave them in the chat and we will be sure to bring those to the attention of whomever needs it and get those answered for you. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest today, Sarah. How are you, Sarah? Thank you for joining me.
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really excited because you have such an incredible journey that you shared a little bit with me, and I've learned a little bit. And so I'm thrilled to bring you to my audience and to go deeper with you and to learn even more. So introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm Sarah Kernion. First and foremost, I am a mother of three beautiful and healthy children, and two of them have profound non-speaking autism. And I began Inchstones as a mission of mine years ago when I realized when my first child with non-speaking autism was diagnosed, and my second son to then go on to be diagnosed at that point was only 7 days old, I started to realize very quickly that the term milestone was not going to be part of my vernacular as a mother. And that's where Inchstones came about, realizing that Sarah as a mother gets to experience, I have a typically developing older child, but they're all beautiful and healthy children. It's just that I got to reorient to the smaller, most sacred, tiny wins. Those are what I call Inchstones. And that began my mission here.
That is beautiful. And I got tears in my eyes. That's just, I think that is so wonderful. I was a special education in the world of special education for over 30 years. And absolutely, we celebrated all the wins. To some people, the wins that we celebrated might not have looked all that big, but to us, they were huge.
Yes. It was so apparent to me very quickly that what the world wasn't seeing, I knew was still a win. I just had this such deep inner knowing. And I thought, I can't deny that feeling and not celebrate my child for making those small wins.
Absolutely. So I have a question for you. One of the things you said is that you have two nonverbal children. And it just dawned on me that you did not say that they are non-communicating. There is such a big difference between verbal and communicating. And can you share a little bit like how you and your child communicate with one another since they do not speak to you the way you and I are speaking right now?
Yes. I mean, that is, I got those Holy Spirit chills because that's again, a foundation of Inchstones is that when you don't have a child that typically speaks and can use their voice, and both Millie and Mac have profound autism, but also have, full body apraxia, which is, the oral motor pathways do not function typically. You begin to not only find the Inchstones of connection, but you realize that they are always communicating. It's just that it doesn't come out of their voice through their mouth, through their voice box. And when I realized that not only the Inchstones matter, but how they were communicating to me looked vastly different. Their receptive language is 100%. right? Their autism
Yeah.
and their dyspraxia obviously creates some barriers to their ability to respond, but they're 100% receptive. And so when I realized that they did have that capacity, their expressive language was less, but that their bodies and then the shared sort of the co-regulation that my presence gave to them to then speak in different and nonverbal ways,
Right.
made me realize that communication extends far beyond the voice. The irony, I've shared this before. I was a double major in college, and one of my majors was the study of communication science. And I took
Oh,
this
wow.
this 400 level class on nonverbal communication. Shelly, I loved it. Like when I tell you 21-year-old Sarah could not get enough about nonverbal communication. I thought it
That's
was so cool because
incredible.
I remember knowing like, God, I love people watching. I love trying to learn about people just by being in their presence, not by what they say. And I found that literally before ages before I was a mother, I thought that was so fascinating. So to then go on to have children with non-speaking autism, it tapped into something that I knew about myself before I even became a mother, is that there's all behaviors communication.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I say that all the time.
Right.
And absolutely. And I love how God prepared you when you didn't realize that you were being prepared. He did the
Mhm.
same thing for me. When I was 9 years old, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I wanted to teach primary general education
Mhm.
students.
Right.
And I never wavered from that, but I would get a voice in my head every few years of, you should work with special education. And I always had a million reasons why, no, I couldn't, because of this, because of that, whatever. And I was growing up when the law was just coming into play. Like I was in kindergarten or first grade when the law became the law of IDEA. And so I didn't see a lot of kids with special education needs.
Right.
But the Lord kept putting me in situations where all those excuses that I had said to him, which I realized that was that still small voice much later in my life, that um, he banished all of those excuses he's like, nope, here, we're going to put you in this situation. Oh, look, you made your connections. Oh, look, you held them to high expectations. Oh, look, you didn't feel sorry for them. Oh, look, whatever else, and yeah. And so I love how when we can look back, we
Oh,
can
totally.
see
And
those.
the preparation was already there.
Yeah.
Similarly, having two children, right, and a boy and a girl, and they're not twins. I always say, like, if you're out and about with me, my Millie is my shortest, unlike the three kids. So
Uh-huh.
when my son is really tall, so they're 2.5 years apart, but like they he's a bigger boy, like they can kind of look like twins and stuff. But I think to myself how lucky I am to have both, and they're not twins. So there's no functional comparison of
Right.
that age wise. But to your point about being prepared, my earlier years, I was a classically trained in vocal performance from a young age. My parents were musicians, and my siblings and I all trained classically where we grew up. And I have an insane knack for music, like and I will listen not just classical music, but like the Beatles and the Beach Boys and like the harmonies. And my Millie is so musically aligned. And I think
Oh,
my
wow.
ability to sing to her, like she wants me to narrate her life as a Broadway musical, right? But I think to myself, that was the preparation. Like I literally have the ability to read music at 42 years old and sing every song, by ear. And I think to myself, that
Wow.
gave me a lot as a child, but look what it's giving me as a mother to a child that doesn't speak. She
Right.
loves she loves everything about it. Now my son has, I mean, not a musical bone in his body, but that prepared me. That was one way that autism emerged in my life, and I already had a skill that I didn't even know was going to align beautifully to help my daughter feel understood, right?
Yeah. That's so awesome. So just yeah, just like you said, just the God winks and the Holy Spirit chills.
Mhm.
It's so incredible. And so you said you created Inchstones because you knew, early on you weren't going to be hitting milestones. So that's the name of your podcast, correct?
Yes, that's the name of my podcast, and my major platform has always been Instagram. So that's sort of where the roots began. I've extended that into the podcasting world 2 years ago, and then last April, realizing that my long form writing was what really was something that was always a more deeper calling to me than what social media and captioning could provide. So the Substack does a more of a deep dive on the things that I share online.
Yes, and I am on your email list, and I love to read what you send out. I'll be honest, I don't read everything, but the things that I have, right? But the things that I have read, I love how you share your heart, and you're very honest and you're very raw in everything that you talk about. And I so appreciate that, because I think that's how we're going to change the perspective. I mean, the reason that this is called hashtag no limits is for people to stop mentally placing limits on other people's potential based on some label or some diagnosis that they have. And I think the reason that there are those labels in people's minds is kind of like myself when I was growing up. Like, I didn't have the exposure. I didn't have what it was like walking in the shoes of the family. I didn't have, knowledge of anybody who was different than me in that regard. And so having my podcast and what you do, the special education advocate that I am, just trying to help people see other people as who they really are and what their abilities can be, instead of, well, this is one characteristic of them, this is a disability, and this is how I'm going to base everything else I think about this person.
Yeah, it's I always, and I think that's, what my Substack hopes to always illuminate, is that it's always yes and. There's never one single vein with which disability has to be or has a chokehold on, right? And it's why I don't, there's so much that goes on, in current culture about autism. And, I don't believe in cancel culture. I really believe that every voice, especially in the disability community, absolutely deserves a seat at the table to share the struggles and pain. Whether you are a mother of a child with level 1 autism, or someone like me who sits on the extreme profound end, or you are a high functioning, low support needs autistic individual, to share what your history was as an individual growing up without the support and scaffolding that you needed. That is so important to me as an author and writer and mother in this space, because that complexity allows for the full depth of humanity to come through, right? That our ability to sit in the space and talk about very, very difficult things, focusing in on the small wins, but also not negating that there is a real grief and loss and difficulty that sits right next to that win. I believe grief and joy, hardship and highs are so beautifully entangled. And I believe that is how being a human was meant to be. I don't think that it's either or. I think it's yes and.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. That's a fabulous way to think about it, because it is. We don't think that we can have two feelings that are the opposite at the same time. And we absolutely can.
Absolutely.
You can feel happy about a situation and be miserable at the same time about that situation, or just be sad. Don't be miserable, I guess. But yeah, I mean, and I think that if we didn't have the lows, we wouldn't understand the highs.
That's right.
If, I kind of think about, I love the Midwest. This is where I live. And one of the reasons I love it is because we have all 4 seasons, sometimes in a day, but we have all 4 seasons. And I think that helps me to, when I'm really cold in the throes of winter, to go, oh, remember in the summer when you were complaining about the heat? Now you can be thankful that it's colder, or the opposite. And I think, that's just a very mild and simple example, but I wonder about the people that live, where the weather is the same all year long. Like, do they lose their appreciation for that type of weather? And I think that's just the same with life. If we were not experiencing hard times, we would not appreciate all the good things. And I love that you focus on littler things, because I think our society is so big concepts, big happenings at once, that we miss so many little things and so many opportunities for joy and progress and celebration.
Yeah, it's a word that came into my mind more later in my journey as a special needs mother was when I never really aligned with what you're illuminating right now, which is reorientation, right? And like
Mhm.
we get to reorient, right? We, you know, in this community, the grief is so heavy sometimes that the reorienting to the small wins or the joy can be seen as like toxic positivity or whatever. And I always say, no, it's not that. It's that it all can exist. Like we're holding this experience, and every time you turn it, it's going to look different. Just like the seasons. Every time that you
Yeah.
experience life and go through Octobers and Februaries and then Junes, they're all gonna. It's still the same experience of your life, and it doesn't it doesn't dampen the other one. If anything, it actually, I think, expands and amplifies the fullness of the experience. I do not
Yeah.
think I would be able to be the human I am and woman I am now in midlife if I did not have what non-speaking autism motherhood is constantly giving to me, which is an expanded orientation to being a woman and mother, right? Like if I only had typical children, I
Right.
only knew that, I know that it would be probably very hard for me to understand the depths of struggle and hard and grief and loss and just intensity of a special needs mother. Now I can I likely would have seen that as a first time mom with a typical child. I would have never integrated that and thought of what an expanding thing that would have been for that human. And then when I get to live it, I think, oh my gosh, again, this is not happening to me to make me get smaller. It's actually the best thing and allow me to get larger from a mental point of view. And I think that that's what wisdom and age does for the majority of people. And I think that special needs children gave that to me, and I always say I've got these two adorable towhead Mack trucks that hit me full on, right? Like they're wrapped in a big bow. And like, I had this typically developing toddler at 2.5 who, you told not to touch the stove and she just never touched the stove, right? I had this like
Right.
this motherhood where I thought like I should write a book on how to be a first time mom. Like I am really good at this, right? And then God and then he said hold it again, right? Because that's what, like, I believe it happened for me because it allowed for that expansive nature. And I don't think, and I think you'd agree with me on this, I don't think that my ability to have that more expansive, more broader orientation, more vast understanding of the world is because I'm Sarah. I believe that every human, and specifically women, mothers, and caregivers, we all have that ability. It's not just because you're Shelley or I'm Sarah. I really, really believe that every mother and woman, it's in them to have that ability to expand like that. It just takes a certain um, sinking in and allowing yourself to sort of process and move through it.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And I loved what you were saying regarding about your parenthood, that if you had only had three typically developing children, how you wouldn't be able to relate. And that was always my excuse when I was, like I said, wanting to go from a primary general education teacher and to now being so passionate about special education. In my book, Those Who Can't Teach, at the end of each family's story, they had final editing rights before publishing. The only thing they did not see was at the end of each of their chapters, I wrote a paragraph to 3 paragraphs of what I learned because of knowing the individual, because of knowing the family, and through the interview process. I knew so many of the families for years and thought
Mhm.
I knew them really well and had a great understanding of what the life was like every day that they walked until I did the interview process with some of them and went, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
I have maybe a thimbleful of knowledge of what it's like walking in your shoes every day. And I feel so blessed and privileged to have that inside look, even though it's not my journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I so appreciate what you're saying there. I mean, mine isn't exactly like yours, but the things that I learned from my students, from the families who have someone who's neuro or more than one who's neurodivergent in their family, the amount of I mean, and it's not the what we often think of as important stuff. You know, it's in a school setting specifically, we're all about the academics, you know,
Yep.
language, math, science, and but in life, it's your character
Yeah,
that guides you more so than your knowledge.
without a doubt.
And the character that I learned about from all of my students, as well as the people in my book, was amazing. I mean, I felt like you said, my mind was expanded and broadened to, whoa, look at all these possibilities.
Yeah.
And again, that comes back to why I do this, because I think that happened for me. I want that to happen for other people.
Yeah. There's a I mean, again, I was using like the sort of the earth moving or rotating example, but like think
Mhm.
about when you look at a pyramid, right? Some people look at it and only see a triangle. When you look from the
Right,
top, you actually see a square and an X, right?
right.
You look from the bottom, you only see a square. And so
Yeah.
I mean, it's the most simplistic way of trying to say that every life experience actually does that for you, right? Or pushes you past that. And when you do things, repetitive behaviors that you love, or, for me, a yoga practice that I do all the time that has the same postures, like that gives me something too, but it's not the same as the reorienting asks of children with profound disabilities, because the disorder of it, because they have, autism spectrum disorder,
Right.
apraxia is an oral motor planning disorder. We as typical humans are trying to resolve those. Like we're trying to make sense of that, where there really
Hmm.
isn't much sense to be made. That's why it's a disorder. And I think
Right.
that the tension, the beautiful tension in the transformative power of it, is that you learn to let go of what you thought you knew it had to be like, and then knowing
Mm.
it's not going to be that way. It's just not. Um,
Right.
like it's absolutely not. And that friction is kind of what causes a lot of the pain, I think, that some parents and um, family members grate against, because they're just unable to accept that it's not going to be typical and develop, and the disorder is going to go away. That the actual process is the integration of the truth of that around everything else that you know to be true. And then that lens, again, it just broadens it. Like I feel like I was like this as a first time mom, right? Like I was literally just
Right.
like, okay, yep, the park and the zoo, and then we're gonna go to Montessori school. Like my monocle
Right.
was like so small. And I probably, like I'm sure a lot of mothers and caregivers feel, I didn't realize that like I could loosen that. And that loosening of that just opens it up to all these different ways of development. And had you asked me, or you ask a typical mom, they likely say, well, of course, I live in the present moment and I have that, but then you want to you have to shatter that really tiny focal point. And the majority of people, I think, do understand that, but it comes through practical life where it really gets implemented.
Yeah, and I have discovered too, and I like that monocle example is,
Mhm.
um, we develop expectations for situations without realizing that we have developed those expectations. You know, when you were pregnant your first time, it's
Mhm.
probably like myself when I was pregnant, like without realizing I was planning my daughter's, I mean, I didn't know at the time
Yes.
she was a daughter, but planning my
Yes.
baby's future, you know, like you
Yes.
said, like, oh, we're going to go to the zoo, we're going to go to the park, we're going to go to the
Mhm.
Montessori school, you know, she'll get married, she'll have kids, she'll do this, blah, 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 you know, she'll graduate high school, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And you just, you're not even aware that you have those
Yeah,
expectations until those expectations aren't met.
correct. I have been talking about this. I'm so glad we brought this up. This makes me like so excited. I didn't realize how much unconscious conditioning was done upon me by the
Mhm.
world, by society, by the media,
Right.
by just being like born in 1983, right? Like I
Right.
never understood, because until you're forced to look at it as to like, why am I like this? Like why did I expect to have three children, to live in central New Jersey? They're all going to matriculate through public school and just live
Mhm.
a life where we go on trips during the summer and that they go to camp. Like what made me so absolutely convinced that that
Right.
was going to happen? And I think that, again, this is what it's been like, again, what it gives to me is I have been able to learn and expand my understanding of socioeconomics, sociology as a whole, my own, core upbringing, and what that gave to me, and what that maybe even conditioned me to believe to be true. Also,
Mhm.
what it gave to me to allow me to become now how I am now, where that expectation was ripped out from under me, but at least I was raised in an environment where volatility wasn't shunned. It was absorbed and discussed. There's all these things that you start
Right.
looking back on and go, how did I expect that? Why did I expect that? What does just living in America do to a young woman about to have children? What they're
Right.
shown. I saw an article come through my email of a thing I subscribed to, and it was actually it surprisingly, because there's a lot of talk about generations now not having as many children in the United States, right? Like younger
Right.
people having children and getting married. And it was an
Yeah.
article that was actually talking about a woman who said, there's so many beautiful parts of motherhood, and we need, as women in mid-age who have children or young grandmothers, to talk about the beauties of raising children. And what I realized, this was like literally 2 days ago, those were the things that I was taking in before I was a mother that made me
Right.
want to become a mother. Like, yes, this is going to be motherhood's going to be hard, but look what it's going to give me. It's going to give me, someone to guide and to be a leader for, and to mold and shape into and it is kept, the article goes on to being like this, you have 18 years to mold this beautiful individual and then set them free. That narrative is like forced down our throats if you aren't aware
Right.
of it, that in
Yep.
every angle, even on a newsletter that I love. Like I love it. It's
Right.
not even, it's not a parenthood blog. It's a, national, culture publication.
Right.
But when I realized that publication that is widely distributed did an expose on motherhood as a way to remind younger generations about the beauties of motherhood, it still fails to inject in there the possibility that might not happen even if you choose it. And so
Right.
there's this societal conditioning of expectations that, again, I wish I could go back and I had time to get my PhD in like evolutionary biology and like these things that we just like, we're so hell bent on thinking that we're going to get. And then when it doesn't, we go, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yep.
why, what? Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely, it's called TV programming for
Yeah,
a
exactly.
reason, like,
Seriously.
because when we were growing up, I mean, yeah, you're a decade or so more younger than I am, but we still had, the yeah, you're an adult at 18. You're done.
You're done.
And for your family, that is not going to be the case.
That's right.
And we have the ideas of, and that's what it is we get these ideas from when we were growing up. It was television. Now it's social media.
Hmm.
Now the ideas that are out there in 20 or 30 years of the different dynamics of families, the different ways that society is, and what is accepted and what's not accepted, that's going to be our children's ideals, that
Hmm.
they're going to go, well, why did I think this way? Well, it's because of the books we read, it's because of the television we watch, the movies we see, and everybody kind of lives like they're programmed to. And that's the,
Yeah,
again, that's
it
where you
really
get
is.
those expectations.
It's why, one of the greatest experiences of my life was studying abroad for half a year in college. I
Mhm.
realized very, very quickly, and I was in England. I wasn't even in a non-English speaking country.
Right.
you realize so quickly, like, oh my gosh, like this is normal for a lot of people. And then you travel, at 20 years old, or I guess, yeah, I was 20 years old, that like, you take a cheap Ryanair flight to Madrid and you barely, you're hanging on for your dear life because
Right.
the pilot's also the stewardess is also the guy that's checking your bags. You get these cheap
Right.
flights there, right? And you land somewhere else and you're in this small town in Spain and you see these children walking around and you're going, that's normal to them. This is all
Right.
normal. And so
Right.
that's, again, I think that's what the beautiful part about, studying abroad or having family in a different part of the country or, whatever it is, traveling.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to come from a family who really valued travel. And that ability to realize that like what we are given, what we were handed here in the States about motherhood, families, this is just the norm here. This is not the
Right.
norm everywhere. And so again, it when you're baked into a population and then you have the different experience, that does create a lot of internal friction, which is why, support groups and online, I think the best part about social media, I really believe this, is the online support for parents of children with disabilities or
Yeah.
combat veterans or anyone that's dealt with a situation that has so radically changed the trajectory of their life. It is the one really wonderful thing about the global village. I really do
Yeah.
believe that, amidst all the different poo-pooing of social media.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're just absolutely right. Like we are programmed and we don't even realize it.
Yeah. And I love the part about the expectations. Like, yeah, that is that person's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And, your children, their sister that is neurotypical, this is her normal,
This is her
you
normal.
know, and uh, again, back to my book, that's what one of the families said when she was describing her son and how, he was standing in his basketball uniform and he looked so tall and so handsome. And she's like, but he's never going to have that experience. And then she kind of stops herself and she says, but to him, this is normal. He doesn't feel bad. I
Mm-hmm.
feel bad because I had an expectation that he isn't meeting. And she says, and I even tried really hard not to have those expectations because I would hear my friends when I was pregnant talk about, oh, I want my child to go to this college or go to have this job, or they were going to play this sport, or they were going to be this thing. And she says, and I tried not to, she said, really intentionally to not have those expectations. And she said, I never thought about having that I had the expectation that my child would be quote unquote normal,
Mm-hmm.
that they would be neurotypical. And again, that's mostly what we see
Mm-hmm.
in all of the media, in all of the all of those kinds of things. And so having the different representations, I do think is really important so that we can shift our narrative in our minds of, oh, that's okay. That's, we often look at people who are different than us as being less than us,
Yeah.
and that they do not equate. They're different does not mean less.
No, difference, not less. Also, a friend of mine who's in literally a totally different space. She's a workplace performance expert. So she's in a totally different,
Oh,
field of work.
right.
And when I was starting the podcast, I was interviewing just a lot of people to get, get my sea legs going. She was talking about, or I was sharing with her that, getting out of the house and interacting is just one of my pillars. Like I do not believe that staying isolated, especially with children with profound autism, is ever the right choice. And it's always going to be 30 times harder to get out of the house, but it's still the right choice to interact with the world in whatever capacity you can versus isolating. And then I said to her, and we were having this conversation, she said, I'm sure you get a lot of looks. And I said, oh yeah, gosh, the stares are and endemic at this point for me. Right. But when I
Right.
framed that as curiosity, and I realized that like we as humans, we are wired to see the mismatch. Like curiosity is just going, wait a second, that doesn't look like what I was expecting. That's
Right.
not wrong. And sometimes I think that I had to shed this, right? I had the identity of a very, I had my first child living in New York City, right? I was a New York City mom who, just all those, and that identity I wore. And
Mm-hmm.
so in sort of evolving into who I am now with Millie and Mac, And it's the curiosity of others or the mismatch that they see, because they're not expecting children that, look like they do, just these little, 11 and 8-year-old blonde, happy kids, to
Right.
stim and to jump, and to one has to wear a harness and all these things. That mismatch, that what's the word I'm looking for? That extra stare too long.
Uh-huh.
I've really tried to reframe for myself as curiosity, because the ego would say, "Ugh, they're staring too long. Like they have no compassion. Like they don't know. They like,
Right.
how dare they? Like, oh, their lives must be so easy. Like over there just gardening and doing their own thing." That's the identity and ego part talking back, right?
Yeah.
The actual root of a stare, or a or someone looking at you and even smiling, but that pause in between is too long for our comfort. If you
Right.
can
Yeah.
reframe it as they're just being human, they're noticing a mismatch, and they likely, if you can give them the most generous take, is that they're just being curious. That's just their
Yeah.
curiosity being expressed. It has nothing to do with what they likely feel, or if they knew anything about who you and your children actually were. And that's helped me a lot, because I do get out in the world a lot. I travel with the kids. We go on, planes, and go into New York City a lot. We live, outside of the city now. And I just always think to myself, like, when I do that, there are going to be more and more people and opportunities for people to see the mismatch in us. And that is so good, because the more that people and families like me and my kids get out there, then the next time those people are their inner worlds are being expanded, because they think, oh, I've heard about profound autism. Now I saw it, and I know what that looks like, and I have a deeper empathy for that.
Yeah. Curiosity over judgment is something that I
Curiosity.
have been saying a lot more in the last year.
Yeah.
Like as I mentioned, as a special education coach, going into schools with families and talking with the staff, and just question what you think you know. You probably don't know. You're
Mm-hmm.
probably not correct.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to the behaviors communication,
Mm-hmm.
so often we think as educators and as adults that we know what a child is trying to communicate to us, even if they're using words.
Right.
And oftentimes we're incorrect because the child doesn't have the words correctly that what they're feeling, or they don't have words at all. And so we're just trying to base it on how they're behaving. And then we put, well, if I was behaving that way, this is what I would be communicating.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's great, but that's not you.
And
That's
also,
somebody else.
the years in which, I mean, this is typical, middle age to younger children. We now know so much more, right? I know so much
Right.
more as a 43-year-old woman than I did as a 22, that I knew as a 13-year-old, teenager.
Right.
And so the translation of that has to even grow larger when, I use this is a very, bold example, but my daughter Millie, for a year or two, would Houdini out of her zipper pajamas and wipe fecal matter on the wall in the morning if I didn't catch her quick enough, in
Oh
the
wow.
morning.
Yeah.
And I, for a while, there's a frustration point of like, how is this happening? Like every morning, right? And so then you start
Right.
redoing, okay, what I need to make sure that I'm up, and that I actually have to wake her up every morning, right? And so you do that, but
Right.
then something happens, and it happens again, and it happens again. You think, what is she trying to tell me? So
Right.
she's seeking out some sort of sensory experience, right? Something about that is cueing her olfactory senses, or it's giving her some sort of input, right? Okay, so how
Right.
do I take that knowledge, not like calm my nervous system to that experience, and then keep reorienting and trying to do better? Like that's all you can do. There's no
Right.
there's no lesson that I can say as a functioning, 40 something year old mother, to a child who is completely dysregulated in that sense, and is also 30 years younger than me. So I always think, like, what is the autism? What is her apraxia? What is her just being a child? And that's
Right.
one of the things I've been, and again, I think having two children and a boy and a girl with the same diagnosis has allowed me to teach and help others is at the end of the day, and you being an educator, a typical educator and a special needs educator would know this, what really sometimes is my son Mac eloping and trying to run off and I can't catch him fast enough because he's so darn quick. What is that the autism and his inability to listen and to stop and have his body stop and reorient? And what is that being just an 8-year-old little boy who's being chased by his mom?
Right.
Now, the majority of the time it's obviously his impairments and he will dart off, right? And he will not come back and he will all those things. But is there a part of me that gets to look at it and go, you're such a little stinker, get back here. And I chase him, right? And I chase a little high and he gets off he gets off the bus. And my daughter Millie can walk right into the house. Like she is, again, and that's just, she's an 11-year-old little girl. Girls are so generally more docile than boys are. Like they just are. Right. And I have to sometimes, I like to give the benefit of the doubt sometimes to their childhood humanity behind it and not just say, oh, that's their autism. Like, oh, that's their apraxia. Like, oh, this is their inability to do X. Like maybe it's also Mac being an 8-year-old little boy who's been in school all day long and just wants to run to the backyard and he wants to take his iPhone and watch Daniel Tiger while he's jumping on the trampoline for an hour. Like maybe that's just him being a little boy. And I get to watch that. And I think that like, again, that difference. And again, I had to be curious about, I knew I was feeling not just anger about what the diagnosis was giving me and how they were presenting. It was also just, they're still kids. They're still small children aside from their diagnoses. So notice that too, Sarah, and that gave me something, and it always fills my heart, like, and allows me to keep going in a lot of ways, because I think I had these two girls that are typical and then atypical, neurotypical, neurodivergent. And then I got this third who's a little boy, and he's such a stinker. He's such the baby of the family. Like at the end of the day, he's still the third kid. He knows he's the baby. He knows I'm a sucker for him. That's my only boy. And then when his teachers at school are like, gosh, when he wants a song to be played, he nuzzles in and he gets all close. I'm like, he knows what works, guys. He knows what works. Like that that is him being a darn cute little blue-eyed, blonde-haired little boy who knows that those women probably are moms too. And and he goes up and they're like, I just can't say no to playing the happy face song again. I know. I'm like, but it's like those moments I love sharing and having other moms share with me, because that's the part that is motherhood. That's just motherhood, right? It's not.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I do find that kind of a fun or a little bit extra joy when I go to these meetings or I'm talking with these parents and, they say something and I'll say, well, that's the child just being a child, and it's like,
girl, like that's just being a kid.
Right. Yeah. And I think you, in your shoes, you probably do have this always mindset of this is the autism, this, and because our society has made that one trait of your child or the adult who, whomever it is, as that is the thing that we base all of every decision on. And I love that you can separate that out and that you are encouraging other mothers to do the same. Because it is like when I say to somebody, well, they're just, what if this is just them being, 8 or 12 or a boy or a girl or, whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. Like I've my whole, since I've gotten the diagnosis, whenever that was, has been, is this, whatever that diagnosis, whether it's not always autism.
That label can go into this tunnel vision of like, everything is autism now. Like everything is apraxia, everything is autism. And it's just not the truth, because, and again, I in a million years did not have two autistic nonverbal children on my bingo card of life at all.
Right.
And because I get to see both, and because they're a boy and a girl, and because they're different ages, that that ability now to see and to hold space for like, well, maybe that's just them being a little kid, or maybe that's Millie being the middle child. Maybe there's
Right.
sibling rank and order. Gosh, there's studies and research done on that in typical families. It doesn't mean that it
Right.
fully
Yeah.
changes because of a diagnosis. But I understand so deeply when parents are only looking at it through that one label and lens, because
Right.
we are wired to seek answers to create understanding about something that is a disorder, and that you think if I just tunnel this enough, I can understand it and get to an understanding, and then have this
Right.
pattern of behavior be X. It's really not that. And I think that, again, I never in a million years thought I'd be someone to speak at the scale I do about profound autism. But again, in having a boy and a girl in it, it's like what the best parts about what I love to share are illuminated through them being my children.
Yeah, absolutely. So this show is called hashtag no limits. And that's, for us not to set limits and to share about limits that people are busting through. So we've talked about Mac and Millie and their profound autism. So I want you to do two things for me. I want you to explain what profound looks like in your children, because it doesn't look the same. I mean, you have two children with the diagnosis, and like you said,
Mhm.
they don't look the same.
That's
Just so
right.
people kind of have,
Mhm.
kind of have an idea. And then I want you to talk about the things that either medical professionals, yourself, family members, whomever, and you don't have to say who put the kind of thought limitation on them, but gave you the impression that, oh, they don't think my child will,
Mhm.
but now my child is. And we've got
Yeah.
about 12, 13 minutes to do that.
I think the simplest and best way that I share about profound autism is that my children, a boy and a girl, varying ages, are individual children that require the highest of support needs in life. Children who simply require 24/7 care. Um, my children, from the moment they go to bed at night, and through the night too, because if they wake up, there's a lot of dysregulation that happens in the middle of the night too. But for the most part, they are children that when they are awake cannot be left alone. They cannot reliably keep themselves safe, and they cannot reliably take care of themselves from a hygiene aspect or a food water intake aspect too. So in my definition of it, and what I believe most people in my community, is that they are at the highest level of support needs from the moment they get up, from the moment from brushing their teeth, brushing their hair, getting dressed, getting undressed, toileting. Even my both of my children are still in pull-ups. There's a complete need of another individual to keep them alive, and that's
Okay.
the truth. Um, the comorbidities that wave through the profound autism community are also very high. So most children with non-speaking profound autism also have, like I've shared, full body apraxia, motor planning disorders that impede their known thought to even translate
Mm-hmm.
into action. And that also, I know a lot of families of profoundly autistic children and young adults who have, epilepsy and seizure disorders. So there's a lot of comorbidities that also weave into profound autism.
Right.
I know that there was it's so funny when you ask, like, what was told to me that they couldn't do. And part of me wonders, I'm like, I have compartmentalized that so far out of my thought range at this point because of what they show me that they can do every day. But I
Right.
do remember being like that very rote diagnosis of, like, your child has, level 2 or 3 autism and apraxia, and likely will need 24/7 care the rest of their lives. And again, that goes into what I define as profound autism. But then when I see
Right.
the inchstones of what they do, that still require care and support, but that my son will take my hand and lead me to the snack drawer, right? My son
Right.
takes my hand or brings me a water bottle. and there's
Mhm.
these things that so I never thought that my children could actually ever communicate that they were hungry or thirsty. I thought I would, for the rest
Right.
of my life, be the one having to anticipate those needs. So they are doing these things, and it does show slivers of independence. It does show agency in some capacity. And even though it's so minuscule, it actually is not the lowest of point where I thought I was told way earlier on in their journeys. Um,
Right.
there was a lot of, oh, this is something that I'm just realizing. I remember being told ad nauseum, you have to get as much interventional therapy before the age of 5 because the brain's neuroplasticity is highest under the age of 5, which I believe. I'm sure it is.
Sure.
I think that what I didn't realize though, is that created such a line for me that if I had to max out by age 5, that the neuroplasticity and what they could do and how they could learn and adapt after 5 was like a
Right.
lost cause. And that's just not the truth. Some
Right.
of the greatest strides that they've made have been from me, taking them into a different schooling setting and to have a more holistic child approach because of what their individual needs are. And this is well after, they were 5 years old. So I
Right.
think some of those like stamped phrases, I'm sure are different for
Yeah.
every parent of a child with autism. But for me, it was a lot of this very, very strong hold on, like anything that happened before 5, I better max this out because after that, you're screwed. And that just isn't the case.
Yeah.
It just isn't the case at
Yeah.
all.
That's so awesome. And I appreciate that. And I'm sure that probably wasn't like super simple for you to go through
Yeah.
and to think about again. But as we mentioned before, you have to have the lows to really appreciate the highs.
Mhm.
And I think it's kind of important for you to, and for all of us, no matter what stage of life we're in, like, the whole caterpillar to the butterfly thing. I mean, whoever, like, I'm so amazed at, and I always forget the person's name that was the first one to recognize that, hey, this little thing is now this thing,
Yeah, like,
like,
it doesn't look anything, and this little thing actually completely dismembers itself. I mean,
right,
that's what it feels like. I mean, it's the most beautiful and epic example of the transformation process is that it literally turns into goo. I mean, like,
right,
it sounds so silly, but like, I
right,
remember thinking that, like, this level, I am no longer Sarah mother to Morgan. Like, I am now Sarah to mother to Morgan, Millie, and Mac. And like, that woman, that mother literally does not exist anymore. And
right,
I mean, again, that's grief, loss, time. Um, if you can really sit in it and think to yourself, what is this doing to me? How is this happening for me? You are going to come out like more vibrant, more beautiful than you can ever have imagined. And it really just points to how, like, there's no deep beauty without deep pain. That we've been sold this idea of like comfort being like the be all end all, right, in this life. Like,
yes,
we will put a price tag on any comfort, right? And there was a sorry to go on a tangent here, but there was a woman that I saw online that said, she's a famous businesswoman, and she's like, I took my entire family on a yacht in like the BVI. And we got there, and I'm just looking around, and I just can't believe that I finally got to do this and take my whole family on this yacht for a week. And then the yacht moved, and there was like a yacht 10 times the size of mine. And she just goes, it's never, we live in a world where like we've placed this idea of like comfort and experience and like money as like this pinnacle, and it will never be enough. It will never be enough.
right,
And I think
right,
that the process of transformation and passion and beauty and inchstones and like the present moment is the greatest life luxury that like anyone, any human, if you can harness that, you've learned how to harness luxury at its finest. And that's what I
yeah,
believe that my children have given me. I know so deeply the luxury of presence, and it's the gift in
yes.
all of us.
And I appreciated what you said earlier, and I'm glad we still have a couple minutes for me to bring this up because you said having your children, what it's done for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and you just kind of alluded to it again, if it happens to you or for you, that is a very different mindset. And I think, like I said, I feel so blessed and privileged to have known and to continue to know so many people who are neurodivergent and the families of those who are neurodivergent, because I think that did happen for me. I
That's
mean,
right.
as much as I taught my students, I've said it and I still believe it. They taught me more than
Mm-hmm.
I taught them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not, maybe more isn't the best word to use. Maybe they gave me better lessons.
Yeah, they enriched the lesson that you didn't even realize you were learning, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, and intent,
Yeah.
intent, like back to like the what you were saying, happening to us, happening for us versus to us. A lot of that, the root of that is the intention behind that. Because if the my
Yeah.
intent as a woman and mother is to create the best version of my children and allow to lead them and guide them into the best version of who they're meant to be, and that's my intent as a mother. So my children being who they are, that still are happening for me to allow me to do that journey, to help my children become the best version of who they're meant to be, full stop. Now, like you said earlier and multiple times, like that has to be removed of the expectation of what I wanted or dreamed of them to be. They are not that. And I think that most mothers and parents would agree with that, whether you have a typically developing child or not. Um, you know, my oldest, my typically developing one, I really did. I mean, she looks so much like me. I thought that she was going to be a theater nerd like I was growing up. I thought she'd be the drama, in the drama club. And she's like a stud basketball player. And I'm like, this is not what I thought you would be. Like, I
Right.
just like, I truly did not think that I was going to raise an athlete. Okay. Like, I did not
Right.
think that like a basketball mom was like part of my trajectory. And here I
Right.
am, like spending weekends at AAU tournaments on the East Coast, and
Right.
like that cracks me up. And then I think what it's allowed for her siblings who have profound autism, and getting those two used to those court sounds and getting them
Oh
used
yeah.
to sitting in bleachers and getting them used to all these different experiences, that's not nestled and divorced from their sister. So, you know, for about a year, I would have to sit on the court with my son. Someone else would be in the stands taking care of Millie. And I would, every time the buzzer was going to come on, I had to cover his ears. So I'd have to like anticipate the buzzer coming. And I have
Right.
to, make sure that because he just stims and vocal stims a lot. And, during a foul shot, when it's quiet, he'd be like, all this stuff. And, but over time, and again, I think what I was able to hold witness for others, okay, this is important for this mom to have all of her children there watching her other daughter. Like, I was not going to let go of
Right.
that. That was important to
Yeah.
me. I wanted my children to know we're going to come support your sister, and it's going to be really difficult, but we're
Yeah.
going to do it. And it's those things that, again, typically, I'm like, I just sometimes can't believe that I'm a sports mom. Like, I thought I was going to be like, dropping her off at the symphony backstage like I was as a kid, but no,
Right.
that wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
so
again, that's, it's not just our expectations when our child is neurodivergent.
that's
It's
right.
our expectations, like I said, for, my own daughter, your older
Yes.
daughter. And yeah, you just, those things are in your head without you realizing that they're there until the shift is somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you have about a minute. What encouragement, what final words would you say to any parent going through life?
Oh gosh. I really do. One of the things that I shout from the rooftops is I believe so deeply in the power of maternal instinct. I believe that we are all innately wired as women, mothers, and caregivers to know and be the experts on our children. And I think that if you can harness that and have a way, a clarity to express that, you will be, regardless of your child's development, the best leader and mother for them. If you can really hold space for that, what you see, the patterns that you see in your children. No one else will ever be able to come close to understanding who your child is and what's emerging in them. And it's, again, one of the foundations of Inchstones is that inner knowing and that inner knowledge of their soul and what they're possible and capable of doing is innately in you. And it's the best data in the world for you as a mother to understand how to best lead your child. So whether that's typical
Thank
motherhood
you.
or not.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful way to end. And I so appreciate you being my guest today. And for anybody, if you would like to get a hold of Sarah, it is inchstones.co, not
That's right.
C-O-M, C-O. And if you want to get a hold of her, it is Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, at inchstones.co. I so appreciate you and all that you do, and appreciate you coming and being my guest today. Thank you so much. And to all of my audience, remember, you know who you are, but not who you will be. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.